Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Brown. I am a youth pastor at Green Creek First Baptist in Polk County. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how God changed my life. You see, growing up, my parents didn't take me to church. I didn't grow up in church. Grew up in um, a split home. My parents both been married 3 times. Uh, but when I was young, in my teenage years, I had a neighbor, and this neighbor used to come by and pick me up and started taking me to church with him. This church had a good youth group. I I really enjoyed it and had a fired up youth pastor. So I started attending the church. I was probably 13 at the time, and got to be around Christians. Got to see what that's about. But when I was 14, we went to a Billy Graham crusade. And at this Billy Graham crusade, it was 1997. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was at the Panther Stadium. It's called Erickson Stadium then. But during this time, God really started convicting me, and right there, I went down on the field. My youth pastor went down with me, and we prayed, and I really could wish I could say this is where, God definitely changed my life at the time. Um, I remember being young and fired up. I remember reading the New Testament, at a very young age. And I wish I could say, I went on and started ministering to people, and I started preaching and all that good stuff. But that's not how my life went. Even though I was in a good youth program, I started getting influence from people I went to school with. Started hanging out with some older people, and eventually stopped going to church. During this time, I really got involved in a lot of drugs. Uh, Not just a little bit of drugs, but pretty hard drugs, and it consumed my life for the most part for the next, my teenage life, truthfully. And so I did a lot of things I regret. But even during this time, I still felt something. I remember being young, laying in bed after a night partying, and still God working on me. But now I'm into my 20s. I think I was about 20 years old, 21, and I met my wife, or my future wife at the time, and my wife, she's brought up in church. She had very godly parents, and I started going to church with her. God started working on my life. I repented and gave my life back to Him, and for the next several years of my 20s, I was fired up. I started feeling the call to ministry. Um, but during this time, me and my wife started struggling in our marriage. Um, I felt like Satan was coming against me, and eventually I stopped going to church, and some of my old habits came back. A lot of drinking, a lot of sneaking around, with drugs, and for longer than I like to admit, I ran from God, uh, and really became a miserable human being. This hole that was missing in my life, I tried to fill with substances, drugs, alcohol, um, money. Tried, go and make a lot of money. Anything that could distract my life from the emptiness inside. I became depressed. I had to go and sort of sunk into a big depression. Had to take antidepressants. Really, my marriage was not that great. We were struggling, me and my wife, and but my wife always went to church, even though I did not go with her a lot of times. But eventually moved to a new town, and in this new town we started going to a new church. And when I mean started going to church, I mean she would drag me to church. I'd fight it sometimes, but a lot of times I keep the peace and go to church. During this point in my life, God started chipping away at this hard heart that I've developed towards Him. Slowly, he chipped and chipped. Finally, one day, he penetrated it, and I gave my life back to Him. Now, this time in my life was a dramatic change. No more depression, no more drugs, no more alcohol. But I'm thinking, when I give it back to Him, I'm like, all right, God, you got me. I'll come to church, and I'll sit on this back pew, and I'll serve you from this pew. But that's not how God works. See, I thought this calling that I had in my young life, it's done passed me by. That was a thing that I missed. But it wasn't long, and I started feeling it again. God's put this passion to tell people about Him inside me. God changed my life. He changed it. It's amazing when I look back and how this big mess I made for myself, and He comes in there and just takes it all away. And so I signed up for some classes at Fruitland. I went to Ministry Essentials. I started teaching my kids' baseball team. I started doing devotions with them. Next thing I know, I'm at a rest home preaching. It's amazing how God worked. Next thing I know, I get an internship at this big Baptist church. Had a steeple and everything. And I filled in, an interim. I got to preach. I started, when youth pastor is out, I go and fill in for the youth pastor. And then next thing I know, God opens the door for me to be a youth pastor at Green Creek First Baptist. I look back at the last couple of years of my life, and I see what God's done. It just amazes me. I thank God for what He brought me out of. I thank God for what He's taken me to, and I thank God that He never gave up on me. If anyone, I get embarrassed telling this story, especially to Christians, like people that's been serving God all their life faithfully. But I can't help it. It's part of my testimony. And I know God uses testimonies. But never get, if you give up on God, He never gives up on you. And I thank God for that. I thank God that He didn't allow me to go be happy. That I couldn't leave Him and go that these other things I try to fill this void that it never could. The only thing that could fill it is Him. God changed my life, and He can change yours as well. Thank you.